What up, Grizz Nation? Welcome to the Grizz 901 postgame show. Daniel's not here, and you know why? The Grizzlies won a game, which means Daniel's not allowed to come onto the show. Truly, it has become a trend at this point. Maybe we should have Daniel just skip every 3 games so we can ensure wins from this point on. But I am your host for tonight, Nate Qualls, be taking us through the game. Got a very, very special guest joining us. He is equal only to me in his hatred of Daniel Greer. So be excited to bring on that host in a minute. But the Grizz pull out the win 106-102 in Brooklyn against the Nets, get some revenge after one of the most embarrassing games of the year just a week or so ago. So super excited to get into the game tonight. We got a lot to cover. Luke Kennard shows up. We got Ethage FFP. Newt Kennard stepped it up too, which is, by the way, the most fun name to say on the show still. So thank you for coming in here. And Jake LaRavia carried us. I know a lot of people want to come on here, and because of what I said earlier in the season, they expect me to hate on Jake. It's been 3 weeks now, and I've not been able to hate on Jake. So I don't know what it is. Listen, I'll eat crow. It'd be great crow to eat. But really good game tonight. A lot of guys stepped up. A lot of things done well. We'll make sure we talk about that. We're going to talk about some roster construction, especially with the guests that we're bringing on. Got some things around centers, guys we have, guys we don't have, the draft. We'll hit on it all tonight. But we're super excited to get on the show. Thanks, everybody, for hopping in here and joining us. Without further ado, I would like to bring in our esteemed guest. I get to play the music. I never get to play the music. I get to play the music. Shawn, I get to play the music. That's right. We have Shawn Coleman, Statsack himself, joining the show, coming in to host us tonight. Shawn, welcome, brother.
What's going on, man? Welcome. It's nice to talk about a victory, but let's frame this, right? Let's frame this as we need to make sure that we hit on all the points that led to tonight's victory with some key players, some key characters who have played a significant part in the reaction from Grizz Twitter this year in not so great roles. And what I mean by that is that Taylor Jenkins just got his 200th career win. The second Grizzlies coach in franchise history to get 200 career wins. And the reason why he did it was in large part thanks to Luke Kennard having one of his 3 best games in a Grizzlies uniform in the same game. That both Jake LaRavia, a double-double off the bench, by the way, Jake LaRavia and John Conchar were 2 of the biggest plus-minus contributors in the game. If this was a game that is going to catch the ire of Grizz Twitter, I think it's tonight. But all joking aside, good to see this win happen, Nate. Because listen, I know that we all want the best possible pick that we can have, the best chances that we can have when it comes to the draft coming up in June. I look forward to it maybe more than anybody. But it also, with the young talent that we have, it's good to see those names contributing to a win. We don't need to have a lot of these 5-6 game losing streaks. Got Taylor Jenkins a career victory. We got this victory. We got some revenge against a team that absolutely shamed us last time. So a lot of good narratives came together to get the job done tonight.
Well, and we don't, Daniel's the one that likes to pick fights, right? That's not really our thing. For better or for worse, it's not really our thing. But man, Grizz Twitter does have to be in shambles after that. Luke heard him and then showed up tonight. I mean, absolutely played out of his mind tonight. One of the best games he's had as a Grizzly. Jake LaRavia with the double-double smooth off the bench. Our guy Trey Jamison was on his way to a double-double before he couldn't stop hitting guys. But that's okay. Trey played well. A bunch of guys played really well tonight. Shout out to Charlie Vines here, Trey Jamison for MVP. And we got to give a shout-out to a couple guys. One, Wayno. Wayne, always thanks for being in here. Black Ninja DJ, thank you for being in here. But we all know the one guy that was always going to show up tonight. Jaren doesn't play. Matt Hurt does, and the Grizz get a win. Ultimate night for old Goon the Shooter. We don't always agree with Goon, but he is family, so we make sure that we have him in here. But Shawn, tonight, big game for the Grizz. I mean, they really needed to bounce back after a couple of games that could sort of be like, this is the way the rest of the season's going to be going, right? And that's the thing that hurts is when you blow the game like you did on Saturday after getting blown out the night before against the same team, it can set you up for the rest of the season being like, you know what, we're it. That's it. We're throwing our towels in. That's going to be it. But they come out tonight, make all the hustle plays, and pull out the win. So to you, what stood out tonight as far as the main effort with these guys and maybe just some of the main players that contributed to it?
Well, yeah, the thing that stood out to me for this Grizzlies team is, what we saw, a couple things that we saw from the squad before the All-Star break. The 6-game stretch before the All-Star break was actually the best 6-game stretch of true shooting percentage, which is probably, I won't necessarily say it's the end-all be-all when it comes to the best measure of shot quality in the NBA, but it's a pretty good indicator. And we were passing the ball and we were finding good shots. But tonight it wasn't because, like then we were threes at a good rate and making 16 of them a game. Tonight what helped us out was a plus 17 measure on the boards. To your point, Trey Jamison did a great job when it came to the boards, but Nate tonight, let's look at it. 5 from Santi Aldama, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 Grizzlies had 5 or more rebounds on the night, including Jake LaRavia, who had a double-double off the bench. It was a collective rebounding effort. And what I mean by that is that it allowed for the Grizzlies to get that rebounding edge, something that had been killing them, over the past few games, was allowing those offensive rebounds to second chance points. But getting the rebounds and also having a go-to guy in Luke Kennard who hit big shots early, hit big shots late, and just in general, you spread the ball around for good looks. But a big key also along with the rebounds is the fact that we also made 2-point shots, 26 of 45 from inside the arc. We're one of the 3 worst teams in the NBA when it comes to shooting inside the arc this year, but our ability to hit those 2-point shots finally came into the equation, and that's what allowed us to get the win tonight.
Well, and real quick, just shout out to Sean Marks and Joe Tsai building this team in Brooklyn that just lost to no Jaren Jackson Jr. in the hustle shuffle, as Chris Ingram likes to call them, the heartbeats, losing to them by 18 on the boards. I don't know how that happens against this Grizzlies team, that the only big you have is Trey James, and he's gone. Like he hit 20 minutes tonight? No, 19 minutes tonight. Listen, as good as guys like Nick Claxton showed, and I'm sure we'll talk about him later on in the show, in the last game against Memphis, you get beat by 18 on the boards to this team. I'm just saying, if you put him in a Grizzlies uniform, I think there would be a lot of hate that's currently directed towards one Jaren Jackson Jr., then directed in another direction. But all in all, man, I think you're right. I mean, it was all the rebounding, all these different stats from the eye test. It was activity all night long, all around, right? And that's, I think, one trend that you see in all these games. Anything that they're competitive in, there's the activity. They're hustling for rebounds. They're getting 50-50 balls. They're making cuts. Even if they don't make the shots, they're getting better looks because they're constantly creating better looks. They're getting the rebounds. They're not giving up a ton of second chance points or fast break points, right? And that's pretty consistent across all these games. Now, I say that I didn't watch Saturday night, and it looked like it was competitive, but it had the entire timeline ready to melt down. So I could be wrong. By the way, Dune 2, great movie. Everyone should see it. That's why I missed the game Saturday night.
See it. Trying to figure out some time to do it this upcoming weekend.
It's awesome. It's awesome. Just trust me. But all around, when you get that kind of activity across the board, even Luke Kennard playmaking off the dribble tonight, he's never going to be a rebounding machine, but 7 assists for Luke Kennard tonight. The activity and the effort keep showing up. So it's great to see that from there. On the net side, there's a lot of nets that a lot of Grizzlies fans want to have. And this is the second time in a pretty short span that we've seen them play. One, obviously, they showed out of their minds. Another one, they just lost to this team. So on the net side, what did you see from them tonight that you think, hey, this is actually something that Grizz fans should latch on to versus this is why Grizz fans shouldn't latch on to that?
The Nets are suffering from the same thing that the Grizzlies are suffering from, and that's good point guard play. And what that means is that you're going to have very different variances, extreme variances. A lot of times, you're going to have offensive struggles that's going to make you feel as if players you think were once one thing now they don't seem to be that because their efficiency's not there, their inconsistency's gotten up, what have you. But you could look at us. You look at how we played against the Bucks in the last game before the All-Star break without Jaren. We beat the Bucks in an incredible game for us, and then we laid an egg, a huge egg, against the Nets, when we played them in Memphis.
Right.
Then you look at tonight, you just got two teams. We had more activity going on, and that's the key. What has really helped us out without playing with a consistent point guard presence has been the fact that when in the month of February especially, we had those nights where we were getting 28, 30, 32 assists. Tonight, 26. Yeah, the Nets had 27 themselves, but you just don't have that, consistent point guard play. And I think that's something to keep in mind, especially when it comes to the Grizzlies, is that several of these players right now, especially Jaren, for instance, his efficiency may not be there. Well, it's because he's in a role that he's not going to be playing moving forward. And I think that's the Nets as well. Now, I'm not sitting here saying that these players are going to get better to the point that the Grizzlies should go after these guys. But I do want to point out that, yes, I don't think Nick Claxton is a sensible target for the Grizzlies. I think that the cost that it's going to take to get him, even if it's a minor cost in terms of a trade package, but also potentially having to pay him $18 to $20 million a year, even over 3 to 4 to 5 years, I don't think it's worth that for the Grizzlies because I don't think that he becomes one of our 5 best players that we want to play in a playoff rotation. Now, you can go get Mikal Bridges, perhaps. Could Cam Johnson be that type of player? Perhaps, but he probably makes too much money. But my point is that I think that the Nets and the Grizzlies share a common factor in that some of these players may not look as good as they once did because they don't have that consistent point guard play to put them in positions to succeed as much. But I also will say that, yes, I agree with you. I know that several Nets players seem like the answer to what the Grizzlies could need when they were fully healthy, and some of them still could be attractive. But yes, I do not think that there is a Nets player outside of Bridges who becomes a clear priority for the Grizz to go after this summer.
Right, and as Goon the Shooter saying, we'd rather get Blake Griffin for rebounds and screens, which I don't know about this point in his career. But on the point guard play, I think you're absolutely right. Because I watch this team, I'm thinking, honestly, they could really use Gilly right now. And obviously, his games were coming up, so it makes sense that they made some room. But, Scottie Pippen Jr., who was showing some real promise when he went down, he's been out with that back injury. They would really benefit from having him on the floor right now as well, right? And so I think you're absolutely right. Dennis Schroeder's obviously been a solid point guard his entire career. Unfortunately, the thing he'll probably be the most famous for is blowing a lot of money with some bad decisions, but been a fine point guard his whole career, but he's not what you need, right? And, I've already thrown my jab at Sean Marks and the Nets organization for deciding that Mikal Bridges is the number one player to build around, despite the fact he's obviously a great player. Not the guy you want to build around, but they just don't have that, right? The same way the Grizzlies are trying to run the offense through Vince Williams and Luke Kennard, and it's just not what they're supposed to do. But we'll talk a lot about all that later as far as roster construction. The Nick Claxton one is super interesting because I think everybody was super high on Claxton in the Grizzlies circles. And over the past few weeks, we've seen him a couple of times, and everybody's kind of like slowly going back down on him. Right. And so that's going to be really interesting. I think, honestly, I'm the reason to blame that DFS shoots like 60% from 3 against us because I famously came on here and said, I don't think he's any good. I've never seen him make any big shots. All of a sudden he hits every shot. But all in all, the Nets, I think they're in a world of hurt. I'd much rather be the Grizzlies than the Nets.
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. Absolutely.
Yeah, and so all that to say, good game from some Nets tonight, but collectively they obviously didn't put forth the effort needed. Grizzlies come out with a big win. To be honest, Sean, I don't want to do too much for looking back at that game because there's a lot of fun stuff, but we're going to talk about all of it later when we dig into some stuff that matters more. So I'm going to send us to break real quick. But first, before I do that, shout out to everybody in here in the comment section. The comment section is what makes this show go. We're still looking for some names. Me and Daniel got this close after the last show to coming up with a name, but Real quick, got to give a shout out to Streetcars of Memphis for making the comment section possible. Streetcars of Memphis, check them out for regular maintenance to all cars and modification, from speakers to lights to lifts and wheels. They can modify everything. Make sure you let them know the Grizz 901 crew sent you. They'll get you an oil change, synthetic, doesn't matter. You go check them out. But Streetcars of Memphis, really good dudes. They were the first sponsor to come on this year, bring us all of this, and make sure we have the good comment section going forward, which is what makes the show go. So shout out to those guys. Give them a call. Real quick, we're going to go to a super quick commercial. We'll be right back after the break.
What do you think is more of a priority for this team? Because you're starting to hear a lot of rumors coming out about teams that are willing to make trades. I'm a big wing guy. This is Memphis. We barbecue in Wing City. So I also understand the importance of big men. The best players in the league are all bigs.
If you're making a player in a lab, absolutely you want to build a Paul George player. You want to build the big wing, Kevin Durant, whatever. Like
Gigi Jackson.
Yeah, or Gigi Jackson, which actually I was thinking about. Oh, what about Gigi, Anthony? But unfortunately, those guys aren't out there. And like, even when you start naming specific names of guys you want to get, like the quality drop off goes down quick. I do think the Grizzlies' easiest avenue to immediately improving next year and getting on the cusp of like being, like a Western Conference finalist, or maybe if you get all the great breaks going your way, is improving your center spot. But there's just more of those guys I feel like available to help you out.
Tune in to the Anthony Sane Show Wednesdays and Fridays at 12 p.m. weekly on the Bluff City Media YouTube channel.
All right, welcome back to the show. I told you that break would be really short. But we still got Shawn Coleman at StatSack here with us, joining us. And with that, you know that we have to cover some things. First off, King, I will suspend him for the night. I can suspend him whenever I want. Plus, we win whenever he gets suspended. So, yeah, we're going to keep him out of here. But with Shawn being here, he is truly an expert. There's a lot of things that me and Daniel get on here. We shoot the breeze about, but we don't really dig into because we're not actually all that smart, despite the fact that our good looks can fool you. But Shawn is truly knows a bunch of stuff. Things. I didn't say Daniel looked good, Shawn.
Okay, good. Okay, go ahead.
I said my good looks.
But you wear sunglasses all the time, and I don't get it. I don't get
incorrect. I wore them to one show you tune into, which is different. You can just say you don't watch the show, Shawn. I don't expect you.
No, I do. I'll just say your eyes aren't your worst feature. There we go. Go ahead.
I appreciate you. That's very kind.
No problem.
By the way, to everyone who thought I was high last game, I live in Salt Lake. I couldn't even if I wanted to, just to be clear. And even with the way the Grizz season's gone, I don't know if you noticed, I've stopped drinking most shows just to be sure I don't develop a problem because of how the season's gone. So, but Shawn, you know a lot more about roster construction, salaries, guys in the draft than we do. So we're going to get with Shawn. We're going to talk about some roster construction. Make sure if you have any questions in here, I know we've got some big man and stuff in there already. Put them in here. So we're going to be hot and heavy with Shawn on all these subjects. So first things first, Shawn, the big situation. That's the big one here, right? And obviously we saw.
Are we going to do trivia?
Well, you didn't message me back. We're going to do it after the next break. We're going to get to it.
Okay, my bad. Because I got trivia. We've got trivia ready to go.
We got trivia. I saw King Meeks was a little bit worried earlier. We do have trivia, King. Don't worry. I'll be embarrassed once again because Shawn actually does good trivia as opposed to Daniel. So we'll make sure he actually stumps me on one. But let's talk about bigs because with Claxton being on the floor tonight, it's going to be really relevant. Like we were saying before the break, some of the gas around him has sort of slowed down, right? It's more of a maybe not. In your mind, what's the big situation look like for the Grizz? Is it as big of a need as we all think it is as far as a true, like, almost star-ish big? Or can they go something a little bit calmer on there?
So when it comes to the big, listen, there are options out there. But the Grizzlies going to get a Nick Claxton, for instance, a Jared Allen, for instance, Matt Herdlicka, who was wrote for Grizzly Bear Blues in the past. He has a Patreon. He had a great thing out today. I've kind of talked about it. I know that Keith Parrish, Grits and Grinds and Fast Break Breakfast, it's been talked about a lot, including here over the BCM channel. But the big situation is this, is that the Grizzlies need to make the decision. Is our best five high leverage or playoff situations, is that with Jaren Jackson Jr. mostly playing that 5? Or is it with Jaren Jackson Jr. playing the 4 and us having a 5 that we can rely on? You can have options where Jaren sometimes plays the 5 and where he doesn't. But which one is going to be our most consistent answer? Now, if we feel that playing Jaren at the 5, and as of our team right now, the other 3 that are definitely on the court are Ja, Smart, as well as Desmond Bane, you're going to need a 4 that can rebound well. You're going to need a 4 that can defend well. And in my opinion, you're going to need a 4 that you can rely on to, score at a, 12 to 15 point pace when he's on the court by being an efficient shooter inside the arc. That's Brandon Clark. But is Brandon Clark going to come back healthy from what he was from an injury that is, in particular to his playing style, very hard to come back from instantly and be what he was? He can, but you don't want to rely on that going into next season.
Right. And with the BC thing, I will say, even if he comes back like 85% of how athletic he was before, that's still top tier athlete. That's still like top 1% athlete.
But here's the big key to that, is that if your starting 5 then becomes Ja, Smart, Bane, BC, and Jaren, Nate, what's the one thing that we don't have in that lineup that you've got to have to be able to be reliable in the playoffs?
Shooting.
Exactly. And so in my opinion, if that's the case, and we're going to focus on putting a significant investment into a big that can it's got to be one that can shoot. And that takes away a Nick Claxton, that takes away a Jared Allen as well. Nick Claxton is not a good fit roster construction-wise for the Grizzlies. I know that he's got good connections. I know Ja loves him, but that's just not going to be the case. So what are some names that do make sense? Wendell Carter Jr. out of Orlando, Onyeka Okongwu out of Atlanta, and Naz Reid out of Minnesota. Now, those 3 names, I can tell you real quickly, probably more likely than not, they're not going to be in a Grizzlies uniform next year. But the thing that I'll say is that at the very least, I would inquire about them, because each of them potentially could be. They could make sense. Wendell Carter Jr. could be on the move. You've got the option to where you could take your pick, which is in the lottery, and you could trade back to where those teams are that I just mentioned and potentially get the guy that you want. Or maybe trade, one of your young roster players like a Santi with Luke matching as the matching salary and then an attractive asset or 2. But those are names that I would go after. If the Grizzlies feel that the version of their team that they want in playoff situations to be their best 5 and it features Jaren at the 4, those are 3 names that I really think make sense. And you have all of them for at least 2+ years if you go out and make the trade for them. Nate, your thoughts, because I have a few other things I'll say to it as well.
Well, my big thing is we got the chat going crazy right now. Half of them are all goon, just trying to get Jaren off the roster, which, again, that's why we love him, but it's not happening, goon. I don't want you to have an aneurysm while we're in the middle of the show. But Jaren at the 5 is not going to be the answer. I just don't think it is long-term. Now, in stints, Jaren at the 5 is absolutely lethal. But even with that BC lineup, the reason that worked was because BC was such a freaky athlete that he could just get in there and he could go rebound and he could do all the things that Jaren was doing while he was roaming as the 4 back on defense, really, right? Or on offense. So then all of a sudden BC becomes a center on offense, and that's able to work. So it's not a normal, like, Jaren's the center type lineup, right, with a regular 4 out there. Mm-hmm. So it's just not going to work. And so you have to get a 5. Now, as far as those names, I love the idea of it's really one of the 2 teams where I'm like, can we have one of your centers? The first one being the Hawks, like you just said, with Onyeka, or Capella. I like both of them. I've been big on Capella, wondering if you got him out of Atlanta, got him into a situation kind of like Steven Adams said out of New Orleans that would fit better in Memphis than it has in Atlanta. But Okongwu, I think, would be great too. The other team with that is the Knicks. Can we have Mitchell Robinson or Isaiah Hartenstein? I like both those guys. I really want to get your thoughts on Hartenstein. I figured you might bring him up later on your own because he's a name that's sort of gotten popular with Grizzlies fans. But all I'd say, you got to get a 5. You got to get a 5 to play with Jaren unless you are going to somehow be able to commit to the BC Jaren lineup, which I think can work in stints. Your matchup super, super well. Generally speaking, it's just not going to work.
Absolutely. And the thing that I'll say about Hartenstein is this, is that, yes, in a vacuum, the Grizzlies said that they wanted to look for a Steven Adams archetype after they traded him away. But I think that they more want to look at that if it makes sense to go with them as getting that type of guy in the draft, potentially. But what I will say about Hartenstein is this, is yes, Hartenstein is probably as close to a Steven Adams clone as you can find. But again, the problem is that he's likely going to command a 3-year, $35 to $45 million deal this year. The Knicks definitely want to keep him. So if you're going to try to do a sign and trade, it likely is going to cost you more to go get Isaiah Hartenstein, even though he'll be at a less cost per year on average annual value than it would be to go and get a Nick Claxton. The reason I don't want Hartenstein is because, again, you then have Jaw Smart, Jaren, and Hartenstein on the court with Bane. You've only got one 3-point shooter you can rely on shooting 35+%. That's not going to get the job done in the playoffs. So I like Isaiah Hartenstein, but he, again, is closer to a healthy Steven Adams than he is the primary shooting source that we need. So I wouldn't necessarily go after Hartenstein for the cost he would be in terms of prospects, but also in terms of cost. One name that I think does make sense, two other options that I do think make sense, and this shifts the conversation. I mentioned Okongwu, I mentioned Reed, I mentioned Wendell Carter Jr. If the Grizzlies truly feel Jaren at the 4 with our 5th best player in that death lineup of ours being a center, those are the names that I would go get. But options that we could go get that could not necessarily be one of our 5 best players, but could in the right situation be that, are cheaper type centers that you can have come in and do, maybe not necessarily to as efficient of an extent, but in spurts do what Steven Adams did. Names such as Andre Drummond, who you potentially could go get, from Chicago. I do think that if you go and talk to him about maybe a 2-year, $15 million deal, that could potentially talk to it. But the thing is, Kelly Olynyk just got extended for 2 years and $26 million. Is Andre Drummond going to be someone that could potentially get $225 this summer? Possibly. And then at that point, does he make sense for the Grizzlies? I don't necessarily think so. One other name that I think does make sense is Nick Richards out of Charlotte. He is someone that could come in, who can set the screens for you, who could get the rim, who could get some shots at the rim, who could protect the rim as well, and you have to play 15 to 20 minutes a night. But if you do that, then what you do is you've got to switch. And your significant move of the summer is then going to get that big 3-4 wing who could play potentially as a 5. The dream there would be a Mikal Bridges. But could you go potentially talk with Washington about a Denny Advia? That's what's going on. So that's what it comes down to. The first question to ask is, when it comes to roster construction, is we need to focus on our best 5 in high leverage and playoff situations. And with that best 5, when we know we're going to be playing 3 guards, is that Jaren at the 4 or Jaren at the 5? And whichever your answer is to that, then you need to find a good rebounding and shooting source to back him up. And I think that'll lead you to either going after the centers that I named or going after that big 3 or 4 wing, along with getting a center that you can, have cheap, which would be a Nick Richards, or potentially getting a cheap center in the draft like a Donovan Clingan.
Well, and we'll come back to the wing conversation. I think that's the next big thing, is the emergence of Vince Williams and Gigi, specifically Vince, especially with how he's played so far this year. What does that do for your wing situation? I do want to hit on that. The bigs wise, I do have to say, I want to see what happens with Gafford and PJ Washington outside of absolute losing situations, because the Nick Richards thing, and I've said this a bunch on the show, anything that Washington or Charlotte has touched makes me nervous, because I'm just like, they could be amazing players. Like Kyle Kuzma, I think, is a super talented player, but he's been in Washington for so long. I'm like, I don't know. So if the PJ Washington, Daniel Gafford stuff works out, that'll help ease my mind a lot around talents like Nick Richards, because athletically, talent-wise, I can't argue with you. I'm just like, dog, he plays in Charlotte, and that scares me. What's going to happen, right?
Hey, Jaren Jackson Jr., and I know that we've got Anthony Sane, who it always frustrates me with how well he knows me. We've got Anthony Sane in the building. The thing that I've told him before, is that one strength that I think stands out about Taylor Jenkins is that he can turn names that you may not think necessarily make the most sense for the Grizzlies. He can turn them into more in Memphis than they were previously. So.
Well, and I do want to say, with Sane being in there, it's always fun to have Sane in here going back and forth. And I do have to say, if I was going to take a side, one of the best fours in the league. Absolutely. We don't realize how spoiled we are in Memphis. So yeah. I absolutely agree. Now, where you want to put him in that conversation, I don't know. But chat, do with that what you will. Take that and run. But on the big situation, I think that money is the biggest thing. Because you look at all these guys, there's so many guys. You look at like Drummond out there. He's making like $3 million this year, right? 3.3, 3.5, something like that. No money at all. And it's easy to look at that and be like, oh, you can afford him. Well, you can until you can't, right? The same way Dennis Schroeder was about to make $200 million and then he made 20, right? Like, the money can change really fast in the NBA. Same thing with Claxton. So I just think personally, I don't know what the situation is because it all plays out differently in the summer than what you think, right? Like, same reason we got Steven Adams here. Never in a million years would have seen that coming. But as far as what I could have for the team as a whole, I want something where they can diversify what they do. And so for the sake of argument, let's just assume Brandon Clark's coming back 85, 90% of the athlete he was, which is more than enough to do the job that he did for the Grizzlies beforehand. In that case, get me somebody who can rebound and who can hold down the paint. That's all I want. Now, would it be awesome to have the playmaking of Steven Adams? Would it be awesome to be able to have a couple of like a rim running ability, something else to make up for that? Of course it would. But at the end of the day, give me somebody who can hold down the paint, anchor the defense, and rebound. And then if you get into those high stakes playoffs moments and you need to go the Jaren 5, Brandon 4 route, do it. That's fine. I just need somebody who can hold it down when those guys can't be in there, who can get those extra minutes so the Grizzlies don't get crushed and don't have someone angering the defense like they have all this year. And something we saw a lot of last year, frankly, when Jaren was out and Adams was gassed. So that's the only thing I want. That's a Hartenstein, Drummond, Clax. I don't care as long as they get in that general direction. So with that, I do want to get into the wing conversation in a minute. But before we do, Shawn, for coming on here, I feel I should send some flowers. And speaking of flowers, that was not my best transition. Pew's Residential Lawn Care Service. So Pew's, from flower shops to commercial landscape maintenance. Pew's has been around for 30 plus years, service in the Mid-South. But did you know that Pew's also does residential lawn care? Pew's residential spray can take care of all your weed control and fertilization needs. If you want to create that perfect weed-free lawn, then call Pew's today for a free estimate, 901-633-2118, and let them know that the Grizz 901 crew sent you. And remember, with Pew's, you get big company strength, small company values. And I have to apologize to Pew's real quick. I've dubbed myself king of the transition, and that was just not my best work. That was a little bit forced. But with the wing, Shawn, I want to talk about one guy. Now, I'm going to save it for later. I'm going to save it for later because I don't want to pick on it too much. I want to decide if it's worth talking about or not. Wings. We have a couple of guys that have emerged this year. So I'm not going to go into the guy I want to talk about. We're going to talk about the guys who have emerged in Vince and Gigi. My personal take on Gigi is he's awesome. Love him. Super excited. He's still got a really long ways to go. And I think we're putting a lot on him way too early. Vince, though, I think you can plug him in next year. Top 7 guy, top 8 guy at worst on your rotation. How does that change the dynamic what the Grizz look to do this summer?
So the thing that stands out to me is that you've got a lot of options, when it comes to Vince and Gigi. In terms of them, being in the rotation, being a part of the Grizzlies plan. Listen, my thought process right now is, with what the Grizzlies are looking to do, your top 4 off your bench next year are going to be Luke Kennard, Vince Williams, Brandon Clark, and Gigi Jackson. As a matter of fact, I think that a good bench lineup with Marcus Smart running the point would be Smart at the point, Kennard at the 2, Vince at the 3, Gigi at the 4, and Brandon Clark at the 5. You've got an offensively focused lineup in that situation, but still one with Vince, Smart, and Clark can definitely hold their own defensively against other bench lineups. But you've got arguably the most historic or the most accurate three-point shooter in the league over the past 4 years in that lineup. You've got one of the most efficient two-point shooters at the start of his career in Brandon Clark, and you've got an all-around scoring option in Gigi who can be a spot-up guy, and then Vince being that all-around guy that can really help out. Plus, you know potentially you can have Smart being the center, having the point guard to being able to move the ball around, or you potentially could look at different options where Vince could be your point guard, and maybe you put your high draft pick at center in that lineup. But the point that I'm getting at is there's a lot of versatility in that lineup. Vince, to me, is our Bruce Brown. I talked about it on Anthony Sain's show a few weeks ago. I put it out on Twitter today. He is that defensive first guy that you could that could be a difference maker on the bench, or he can apply, winning basketball to a starting rotation. He's shown that he can be versatile and do different things on defense. Can be a lockdown defender if he needs to against very good talents. He's a good rebounder for his size. Can play a lot of different roles on offense. He could be a good spot up shooter, or he could be a facilitator. He's a connector type piece. G.G. Jackson, to me, is going to be that all-around bench scoring option. We've heard Memphis, we've heard Grizzlies Twitter talk about for years that go get a bucket guy off the bench. Well, that's Gigi. We're seeing the fact that he can spot up shoot, which to me sets him apart from a lot of other bench go get your bucket shooters or scorers, and that he can play up with our best players because he's a good spot up shooter, but he's also shown the ability to get to the rim, to the free throw line. So those guys make sense. Now, I don't want to piss anybody off, but I'm all about doing what makes the most sense. The other thing that you have with these guys being signed to the contracts that they have is maybe Luke Kennard's not here next year because you've used him to go get that big wing or that center that makes sense. You've got Vince and Gigi there as potential trade assets in the right deal if the Grizzlies really find someone they got to go get. I think that's a very low chance of happening. But you put one of those two with our first-round pick and add it to Luke Kennard, you've now gotten up to $20 million in salary plus some very good assets to potentially go get what you've got. Again, I'm not advocating that you trade Vince or Gigi, but my point is that, yes, you've already in a good place with them being a part of your bench for years to come. Maybe Gigi becomes a starter 2 or 3 years from now, but I do think they're going to be a part of the bench next year. I think it's going to make our bench one of the best in the league, but you also in the right situation. If you want to go big or go home this summer and you want to include them in a trade package, you got that as well with the contracts that they have on. The whole point that I'm getting at is that both players have significant room for growth, and you've got them on very cost-effective contract over the next 3 years. The Grizzlies are in a good spot for them, and they need to utilize them correctly, which I think they'll do off the bench next year.
I'm going to put you on the spot. Who's the guy that is worth making that kind of package deal for in your mind? And if you're going to do it, Vince or Gigi, who you put in the package?
I'm putting Vince in the package, and the guy that I definitely think, I definitely think that you go after with that type of package is potentially you go after Mikal. I would even love to go after Franz Wagner of Orlando. So this type of guy that you need to go after, I think that it's probably a guy that's not going to be available. Would I include Gigi or Vince like going after a Deni Avdija? Probably not. Would I include Gigi or Vince in the deal to potentially go after a young center big forward combo that could be out there? Sure. But again, I'm talking about things that probably don't make sense. But the key is that even if it doesn't make sense now, you could at least by including one of those two in a trade package, make it make sense. Again, don't think that's going to happen, not advocating for that to happen, but with how well they played and how good their contract is, it at least is not a far-fetched discussion that could happen over the summer.
Well, and I want to ask you why Vince in that case. Because here's the thing, and I think I know the direction you're going to go, so I'm going to take a little guess at it. Vince has shown it. Vince has shown he can be a 3-and-D wing. And I know his shooting's fallen off a little bit as of late, but that's what's going to happen when you're on ball all the time and you really shouldn't be on ball all the time. That's what's going to happen. His shot's getting flat because his legs are tired and he's tired from doing everything else. So maybe like Jaren doing everything. So some things are going to be lacking. I don't know, Goon. That's for you. But coming into that, Gigi has the ceiling, right? Is that where you're coming at it from, or is it something different?
Oh, it's the ceiling, but also it's the fact that, again, we're trending to be an offensive league. And if GG in any way, shape, or form can show he's a 38% or better three-point shooter in a spot-up form, that is something that can play off of our bench. Or in my opinion, more importantly, it's something that can play at the 4 in a lineup that has Bane, Jaren, and Ja on the court. We see last year that having a consistent offensive floor is one of the biggest keys to winning a title. We've seen that over the past couple of years. The last 13 NBA champions have been in the top 6 in the year that they won the title in effective field goal percentage. G.G. Jackson is someone that can help us out in that aspect. So it's not just the fact that his ceiling is there, Nate. It's also the aspect of it being the offensive ceiling that stands out. But again, don't want to sit here and talk too much about those scenarios. But my point is you can go a lot of different directions at a lot of different levels of significance. But at the end of the day, I think the Grizz just need to be smart, feature both of them off the bench next year. And especially if you trust in their shooting, then that frees up Luke Kennard, who makes a little bit more sense to go after, a trade with to be expendable with how much money he's owed next year.
Well, and I'm going to be completely honest. Like, obviously, if you can get in Mikal Bridges, that's fantastic. You probably want to do it. Sean Marks probably going to make you send Jaren, Ja, and Bane to make it happen, but that's beside the point. Shout out to them building an awesome contender over there with what they showed tonight. But all that to say, I'm not moving off these guys because I don't think the move's there. I don't think the move's there at all for that. And you already said you don't think on your end it's very likely. If it is, that's awesome. But personally, I just don't think it's going to present itself to be able to make it happen. And go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, so Sherman Jones in the chat talked about why do we need an extra shooter when Jaren is a shooting big himself? Well, the reason why that is because you want that big to be a shooter, especially from the corner 3. The Grizzlies this year, if you've watched Taylor Jenkins' offense evolve over the past 5 years, one thing that you have seen evolve is that he consistently has a big in the corner because he wants the corner 3 to be a significant part of the Grizzlies offense. But right now, this season, we actually are last in the NBA in three-point shooting from the corner. We've not been that way in the past. When we've been shooting well on offense, it's because of that corner 3. Jaren is not a corner three-point shooter. He's an above-the-break shooter, and he's more of a volume shooter than he is a highly accurate shooter. So if you can add another shooting big that can go to the corner and make some threes, a team like us where we've got Ja, Jaren, and Bane putting pressure on the lane, and then Ja and Bane being able to pass out to that corner with the big, that's the reason why you do it. It opens up another part of the court that could be especially beneficial in the playoffs. That's why you need another big to go along with Jaren as a shooter.
Well, and the other side of that is all this is super fun to talk about. All of these are great hypotheticals. It's really easy to forget how awesome Ja Morant and Desmond Bane and Jaren Jackson are when they're playing together. Like, that was part of what me and Daniel talked a lot about at the very beginning of the season during the Ja suspension was he's not going to fix every problem you got on this team right now, but by God, he's going to fix a lot of them. And sure enough, Ja Morant comes back. They win 3 awesome games. They absolutely destroy the Pelicans' heart and souls twice within a week. And it's like a lot of things get fixed. And so as much as they get open corner threes right now, that just gets amplified and exponentially easier shots and more shots from the corner when Ja Morant gets back, which is why that's so important to have that in there. And I think personally, GG, I think I'm one of the people who come on here is not afraid to be a very big realist about it, which is GG has all the talent in the world. He's going to find his way. Right now, he looks lost on the court a lot, right? And it's like, you see the individual defense tonight. He had that block on the fast break that was just, he spiked it off the backboard, right? He's got all the defensive potential in the world. He's always getting on, or oftentimes, not always, switching on to the wrong guy, getting lost on the team defense, right? And so all that's going to come together. But if Gigi's showing the way he's showing now, and he's a 19-year-old that clearly is still figuring out almost everything there is to figure out about the NBA, imagine when he develops, maybe just this summer, but especially over the next couple summers, what that's going to turn into. Now, the last guy, and we haven't really talked about it much, but it's been a big thing. We mentioned at the beginning of the show. Luke Kennard, one of the best shooters on planet Earth. But his flaws have been shown a ton. Now, tonight he comes in, has 7 assists to go with 25 points. Played awesome. Do you think Luke fits with this team fully healthy? And would you move him for anything that wasn't that Mikal Bridges type move?
Yeah. So two reasons why I think that Luke Kennard fits this team when fully healthy. Again, I mentioned that, two of the biggest things right now that stand out for an NBA team to truly be a contender is on offense, their ability to be able to do well in the half-court offense, as well as the ability to have consistent, effective shot selection. I just mentioned that, over the past 13 years, the past 13 NBA title winners, in the season that they won the title, they were among the 6 best teams when it came to most frequently finding the best shot on each possession. You have to be good at that ability to be able to contend in the playoffs. Taylor Jenkins, in each of his 5 seasons, even when we ranked highly 2 years ago on offense that was quantity over quality, the Grizzlies have been 20th or below. They've been in the back 3 of the NBA in effective field goal percentage. We've also consistently been in the back 10 of the NBA, 20th or worse, in half-court offense. Those are 2 areas of offense that we have struggled quite a bit under Taylor Jenkins. But lo and behold, we add Luke Kennard at last year's trade deadline. And even without Ja, without Brandon Clark, and without Steven Adams, everybody talks about how important Steven Adams is to this team. With Steven Adams, we were 22nd in half-court offense. With Luke Kennard, we were 11th in half-court offense. When Luke Kennard in the second half of last year, we were 11th in effective field goal percentage. We still weren't where we needed to be a true contender, but we were much closer than we had been. And what about the playoffs? It amazes me that everybody forgets, I won't say everybody, but it seems like that people don't care much about just how important Luke Kennard was in the playoffs. And it wasn't the fact that Luke Kennard was not important. It was on Taylor Jenkins. And I'm a big Taylor Jenkins supporter. Taylor Jenkins reacted too slowly to trying to feature Luke Kennard over Dylan Brooks. The stat that I'll throw out there, and then I'll be done, is the reason why Luke Kennard makes sense for this team when healthy. In 220 possessions that Luke Kennard was on the court in last year's playoffs against the Lakers, the Grizzlies outscored the Lakers at a pace of 16 points per 100 possession. He had a plus 16 net rating when on the court in the playoffs versus the Lakers. When he was off the court, the Lakers outscored the Grizzlies at a 20-point per 100 possession. There was a 36-point swing in the favor of the Grizzlies when Luke Kennard was on the court versus when he was off. And that's why he was important, because of the spacing that was there. Now, with all that to be said, my point in bringing that up is that when we're fully healthy, we're wanting to win, we're wanting to contend, we're better with Luke Kennard than we are without him. But the most valuable way to use Kennard is still likely as a money-matching piece for a potential 2-way option that could be more playable and more reliable later on in the playoffs. Luke Kennard could help us win an opening round or maybe even a second-round playoff opportunity. But if you feel strong enough about your shooting depth, and then you can go use Luke Kennard to get a 2-way member of the front court to pair with Jaren, that could really be a good playoff rotation piece, that's going to be worth trading Luke Kennard. So I put it on Twitter yesterday. I said 2 truths exist about Luke. His best value moving forward is probably as a money-matching piece for a reliable rotation piece you could use throughout the playoffs. That is true. But what's also true is, due to his shooting, this team is better with him than without him.
Yep, and I got to bring up this comics. I think this is one of the misconceptions we get about Luke because of what happened in playoffs last year. Wayno with the breaking news: Luke Kennard out 3 weeks after untying his shoelaces after today's game. Wayne, thanks for always being in here in the comment section. But I think, like you just said, there's a lot of misconceptions about Luke. Right now, has he been hurt and MIA a lot this year? Yeah, guess what? So has the entire team. There's a reason that a lot of these guys aren't playing right now that probably could play in a different situation, right? Like, you got to understand, I don't think the Grizzlies are actively tanking. Do I think they're holding guys out they wouldn't normally hold out this time of year? Yeah, I do. Absolutely 100% think that's the case. But that's the biggest thing that drives me crazy is when we see the Luke disappears in the playoffs comments, because it was just the absolute opposite. It was just the absolute opposite last year. He was the solution that the Grizzlies had found to defeat the Lakers. And then he gets hurt, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, look, Dylan Brooks is wide open in the corner 17 times a game. It's like, it's such a mess. And I'm 100% with you on that. If they can get a piece like a Mikal Bridges, they can get a piece like I've always been a big Jeremy Grant fan, even though Daniel hates him for some reason. I think there's a lot of players that money-wise you can't make it work, but the archetype, huge fan of. I just personally don't think that move presents itself. I just don't know who that's going to be. And in that case, you keep the guy that shoots dang near 50% from three.
And the other thing is, and a couple of things that I'll say to this, Wayne Hunt in the comment talked about how Luke had been injury prone since he was in the Pistons. I do feel that is relevant. Luke has, had his injury concerns. He definitely has. Last year with the Clippers, it was more he was sitting, not playing, because the Clippers are one of the deepest three-point shooting teams in the league. But I will say that Luke has had some injury issues throughout his career. However, Luke being used in his more ideal role when we have our best players available on the court and him playing 20 minutes a night as a spot-up shooter off the bench in which he won't be banging and clanging and high usage with better competition. He'll be a spot-up shooter against bench lineups. That probably will make it less likely, he's going to be injured. And the other thing that I'll say is this, and then done with Luke Kennard on my end, is that, I know a lot of people are kind of turned off by the idea of him making $14 to $15 million. Well, I get that. But that's why you moved off of the Steven Adams. That's why you moved off of those other salaries. That's why you can move off of J.D. Zaire or a Jake this summer. But you also have the ability to where he has a team option that could be picked up. The Grizzlies in the past have actually not picked up that option and wound up extending a player. I believe that you did it with Jonas Valanciunas. His may have been a player option, but you extend a player for a lower average annual value, but you give him more years. A Luke Kennard on a 3-year, $35 million deal over the next 3 years, that's a pretty darn good, valuable contract. And he's one that definitely can make sense for our rotation, or it allows for him to continue to be a potential trade piece when we do make a big move in the future.
Right. And I think the jury's going to be out, but I think you're absolutely right of like, hey, if you can make the money work in one of those deals, that's number one. That is the number one thing to do. But on the other side, like you're saying, it does get team friendly if you're able to keep them. But there's one last guy I want to talk about.
Okay.
There's only one. Lamar Stevens, I think, is interesting. I think we're all on the same page. Find a way to make him a Grizzly, especially if you can get him for cheap. Try and get creative, make it happen, if at all possible. The other guy I want to talk about is a guy that our friend and family member, King Meeks, keeps wanting to bring up, and I've been waiting for it, King. I've been keeping it. Santi Aldama, who he wants to trade for Julius Randle, or maybe even Julius from Everybody Hates Chris. And Shawn, I got to be honest with you, man. I said this on the last show. I think I said on the show before that. And I think I said on the show before that. I refuse to jump to any conclusions about most of these guys with the current state of the roster in a negative way. What is up with Santi Aldama?
He doesn't have a point guard. Same thing that's up with Zaire. Same thing that's up with Jaren's efficiency. He doesn't have a point guard. You look last year at the numbers.
That solves everything.
Yeah, but you look at the numbers last year when Jaren and Santi were on the court. They were great. But a big reason why is because they were just outstanding, astronomical when they were on the court with John Morant. When they were off, they were just good. So the point that I'm getting at is that I agree with you. But it comes down to this. The situation that teams are in right now, or the situation that we're in right now, players that you have a history of knowing what they could be, like a Jaren or a Luke or a Jitty, for instance, them playing in this situation and maybe not having the same efficiency that they have when we're fully healthy, that means maybe not look too much into what's going on right now with how they're playing in this situation. But players like a Jake or a Santi or a Zaire or even a Lamar Stevens, it does matter with how they're playing. Those guys are playing, Santi and Zaire and a few others, their efficiency is down because they're so reliant on a point guard. Well, that means that, we've not seen them be successful without a point guard. And that's something that's definitely questionable when it comes to, could he be a part of the playoff rotation? Could he make sense to extend? Because we've only got Santi under a contract for one more year. A year ago, I was thinking he made more sense to give a 4-year, $50 million deal to than Brandon Clark. I could go, where we are in the show, I can go a lot of different directions with Santi. My point that I'm getting at is that with him and Zaire, they are very reliant on having good point guard play. I do think Santi can be valuable with good point guard play, but I also think that in the right deal, perhaps if another team feels that they can unlock Santi like we saw in his second year, do you put him with the Luke Kennard to get you the $16 million, $17 million matching salary to go get a significant contributor for a playoff run? Sure, I think you can do that. Santi could make sense, but at the end of the day, if you've got Jaren, You've got Brandon coming back. You add a veteran big in some way, shape, or form. Plus, you add a big in the draft. Is Santi now your fifth big? And if that's the case, he probably has more value as a trade piece than being someone that's going to be an Xavier Tillman type role. I think Santi will be better as time goes on, but do I think he's someone that could clearly be a part of a playoff rotation like I did, potentially this time last year? Probably not over the next few years. So Santi is certainly expendable. Does he have as much value as he once did? No, but I could definitely see him being included in trade discussions along with Zaire and Jake. Oh, and to the point of Lamar Stevens, once you potentially trade two of those three, if you were to trade two or three of Jitty, Santi, Zaire, and Jake, then yes, Lamar Stevens is definitely emerging as a player this front office and coaching staff likes. I definitely could see them making a opening for him next year.
Yeah, and 100%. Like that's one that I think every Grizz fans like. If you were never gonna like just find a way to kill those contracts, get rid of them, take on the money, like this is the type of thing where like we found a guy. You found a guy that you can plug and play and contribute with whoever's on the court. If he's plugging and playing with this crew, you can kind of plug and play with anybody. But see a lot of things around Santi on here, and I'm gonna be honest, like again, 100% agree. It's the same thing when people were getting mad at Jaren for not being able to close these games. I'm like, what do you want him to do when he has three guys crash on him every time he touches the ball? Because, hey, we'll let Vince Williams shoot the three. Or, hey, we'll let Jake LaRavia shoot the three. You can't put that much on guys with the current state of the roster. All that to say, this is what bugs me. Santi does not play like a big. So when we talk about he's your fifth big, it's like, no, he's another guy who is big, in my opinion. Like he does, you see him when he has these big rebounding nights. He has these big rebounding nights that everyone's trying to block out Jaren or something. And so he crashes the boards and no one's boxing him out because no one's worried about Santi. It drives me crazy because the dude is always playing finesse. Now, he's not a big bulky guy. I don't expect him to play bully ball like a la Andre Drummond or even Jokic for that matter. At the same time, the dude wants to be a finesse player. And I'm like, man, of all the times in the world in your career, this is the time to go try and play big. And he just doesn't. And if he can't find a way to play big, and he's always going to be a finesse guy, I'm like, that's where I come in with you, where I'm like, how do you fit on a team that's desperate for guys who can play truly big, in my opinion? Drives me crazy.
I'll answer a quick question from Wayne, and forgive me if I'm messing up the flow of the show, but do like being able to talk with this awesome chat. Or excuse me, from Black Ninja DJ, who asked about some names of big men to watch in the draft. The dream's Alex Sarr. Getting him at the pick one or two. In the back half of the top 10, Kyle Filipowski is a guy out of Duke who really matches what the Grizzlies look at. From a statistical query, what the thresholds that they like to check when it comes to prospects. Donovan Clingan is that Steven Adams archetype, that rebounding, screens, rim protection, rim running, that you could see them definitely wanting to go after. A more longer term project that could really benefit in our system. Yemisi out of Baylor is someone that has some of the highest upside. And then you look kind of more towards the back end of that first round. A guy like Steron Holmes, Khalil Ware out of Indiana, a bit more of a slender big, but could make sense. Those are some guys I know that people love. Zach Edey. I don't necessarily know if Zach Edey makes the most sense because I think that he's more of a niche rotation type player that fits with some teams, doesn't fit with others. I don't necessarily think he would fit with us, but those are some guys that can definitely make sense. If the Grizzlies were to get a Clingan or a Filipowski, I would be more than happy. Alex Sarr would be a dream, but those are just some names that kind of make sense.
And stay tuned because we're going to talk about the draft here in a second. We are going to get just some general draft talk, especially because since Roddy got traded, my draft expert status has been all but completely murdered. So that's the only thing I had as far as that goes. But real quick, Wayne, thanks for joining us, Shawn. Do appreciate having you on here, getting to take some different things than we normally would have, especially just having anyone prettier than Daniel on the other side is always great to have onto the show. But real quick, we're going to head into the break. We're going to come back with some quick, just for King Meek's Grizz Trivia. We'll hit on that real quick, and then we'll get into some draft talk. We'll probably skip the game preview for next game because let's be honest, we're all just curious as to what's going to happen tonight. Real quick, going to the break. We'll be right back.
I'm just big on being able to vocalize what someone's role is. I always thought my best coaches were the people that let me know exactly what you expect from me. Now, I might not like it.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
But if you come to me man to man to say, this is how we think we're gonna play you, bang, 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 and hopefully everybody understand. I'm not saying that this has not been done with this team. Mm-hmm. I'm just saying from my experience, we all have egos when we get to this game.
Right.
All of us, you got an ego, but all of us can't be the man.
Yeah.
You got to be able to say, okay, he's the man, but what do I do and what can I do to help us be good? And if it's vocalized to you, then you know exactly what. And if I'm out there doing it and now I'm not getting the result from you, now we got to sit down and have another conversation. Mm-hmm. But as long as it is told to you, this is what we expect from you, this is how we want you to play, then I feel like, again, keeping his logo.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Tune in to The Anthony Sane Show, Wednesdays and Fridays at 12 p.m. weekly on the Bluff City Media YouTube channel.
All right, welcome back to the show. We're going to do some quick Grizz Trivia here in a second. Shawn gets a pick on me. I assume it's actually going to be a good one because it's Shawn doing it this time around. But before we do, we got to give a shout out to one of the OGs of the show and now sponsors of the show, Heaven's Healthy Kitchen. Heaven's Healthy is a grassroots business that was started right in Memphis, Tennessee. I can't say right here because I'm in Salt Lake, so that feels like I'm lying. But right in Memphis, Tennessee, Chef Smith is a Memphian that promotes healthy eating and wellness. If you're looking to go cook at home, go get Chef Smith's cookbook right off Amazon and download it today. Heaven's Healthy Kitchen continues to do all these monthly pop-ups, so stay tuned. Daniel especially has tried all these foods, loves them. You should have seen him eating the cobbler. Once the show was wrapped up, I was a little bit worried because he's already getting a little bit extra weight, but really, really good stuff. Make sure you stay tuned to Chef Smith. Check him out at orderhhk.com. Serving and catering plant-based and vegan gourmet foods straight to you. Shout out to Chef Smith. Truly been here since day one, basically, of the show. In the comment section, regular on the show. So excited to have them as a sponsor. And the food is absolutely incredible. So make sure you go check him out. There he is. Shout out to Chef Smith. I was about to say, I hadn't seen him in the show tonight. Just called him a regular. Glad you pulled through for us. But, Shawn, it's your turn to pick on me for some Grizz Trivia.
All right, here we go.
I get to play the music.
All right, so.
All right, let's get into it.
I got to wait. Yeah, okay. So, tonight, John Conchar became the fourth Grizzly in franchise history to, in a single game, have less than 10 points scored. Not 10 or less, but 9 or less points scored, while also having a plus-minus of plus 15 or better. Okay? These players that don't score much but still contribute to winning on a frequent basis, all right? So the fourth player to do that 15 or more times in Grizz franchise history, Nate Qualls. Name me the other three that have done it 15 or more times.
How many times? 15?
15 or more times, yes.
15 or more times. Okay,
yes.
So we're talking about guys who don't. Oh, Lord, this is not going to be good. And there's 3 of them?
There's 3 of them. And I'll go ahead and give you a clue right now. King Meeks guessed Tony Allen. He is not one of them.
Okay. I've got the comment section closed. I don't want any giveaways. Who didn't score all that much?
Spread it out throughout the entire time that the Grizzlies have been in Memphis.
I feel like this can't be right, but they weren't scoring as much while he was here. Is Battier on that list?
Battier is number 1.
Let's go. Let's say he could shoot, but there wasn't much scoring in the league when he was there.
On these type of questions, Battier is always number 1. So very good to you. You've already, in my opinion, got an answer. But who are the second? One is kind of obvious. The other makes sense.
Is it sad that I want to say Lamar Stevens? It's already only been here for 3 weeks. He hadn't been, I don't know.
Play 15 games with us to be able to have 15 plus.
But he looks like he's going to be that kind of guy. Yeah. I mean, it feels like this can't be right. But Vince Williams?
No.
Okay, I was about to say. I was like, he hadn't been here long enough.
But one of these names is in this era. Think about it.
One of the names is in this era.
Think about it. Think about what player over the past for the Grizzlies has been
Steven Adams.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He's third on that list.
Okay.
The other one is a bit more prominent than Battier or Adams in the history of the Grizzlies, but he might surprise you that he's on this list.
Okay. He has to have scored less than 10, so 9 or less.
Yeah, 9 or less, but plus 15 in the game or better. Now, you've got the comment section.
I don't have it on. I have it put away.
I have it on, and I believe it was Goon. Goon got it right.
Goon got it right?
King Meeks got it right, this third guy.
Okay. Not correct, though.
Yeah, his level of prominence is higher in the history of the Grizz than Battier or Adams.
I feel like I'm going to feel so stupid after this. There's no...
I'm going to go ahead and give you a clue because I'll help you out here a little bit. He has 20 less technical fouls than he does these type of games in his career.
No way. Is it Zebo?
No.
Okay, I was about to say there's no chance. There's no chance. Oh.
It's
Golly,
Mike.
Sorry. I was sitting there, I was like, oh, he has a bunch of these games. I was like,
Battier has 25 such games in the history of the Grizz. Mike Conley has 20 such games. Steven Adams, 17. John Conchar, 15. Now, that's a stat query question, but it's a fun question because these are the type of players that you would love for the Grizzlies to have moving forward. So, and shout out to King Meeks for getting one of the names early. So,
I tell you what's crazy is just thinking about it in like current NBA terms.
Sure.
It's just like in the current NBA, could you imagine like a Shane Battier or a Mike Conley scoring 10 points almost every game?
Shane, an early part of his career, Shane Battier would have been an absolute dream to have with the grit and grind.
Right.
I know we got post his prime Shane Battier in that era, but yeah, those type of players would have been amazing to have. Just like a Luke Kennard would have been perfect for the grit and grind Grizzlies as well.
Well, listen, I got number 1 right on the first guess, so I feel like I get to count that.
You did well.
Shout out
in the chat.
That's the spirit of Grizz Trivia, and all it took was Daniel not being here for the thing he created for it to be done perfectly. So. That's awesome, Shawn. Thanks for that. Because that was a really good one. That was a fun one. So that was good. Shout out to the chat. I'm looking through it now that I'm going through here in our comment section. There's a lot of guys that had a lot of really good guesses.
They knocked out the top 10 in this. I didn't see the rest of the top 10, but Lorenzo Wright, Tony Allen, players such as that, those guys were definitely.
That's awesome. Good shout out. That's awesome. That was fun. All right. Real quick, we're going to skip the game preview because, again, who cares about any of that? We're going to get into some roster construction. Really, the only thing I want to talk about is the draft. Again, I know nothing about the draft. The only thing I've ever had is that I said the Grizz should draft David Roddy. They did, and his rookie year was a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
It's the only thing I have to my draft name.
Mm-hmm.
You, on the other hand, know a lot about the draft. So with that, I think the obvious choice is that the Grizzlies should trade their pick, see if they can turn that into something. That being said, if the move's not there, and if they can't, every draft has some hidden gems. For you, let's say the Grizz are picking somewhere in this 4 to, let's say, worst case, 8 range. What do you have as far as the Grizz and who's available that makes sense for them?
Yeah, a couple of strategies that make sense. So I like the idea of trading, but I'm more of a trade back guy than I am trading the pick itself. Like, listen, if you're going to trade the pick, number one, I agree. Alex Sarr or Zachariah Ricochet, I believe is his name. I've botched his name. Those two are a dream. Front court guys who can sit here and add a lot to what we do, a lot to what we need to do to move forward. Sarr would be the dream if we get picks 1 or 2. Nikola Topic, I'm not necessarily all that interested in, so on and so forth. If we were to keep our pick and make the pick in kind of that 4 to 10 range, guys that make sense to me are Donovan Clingan, definitely from UConn, because he is an efficient traditional big, and he is someone that can fit what you're looking for when it comes to facilitation out of the center spot, screens, rim protection, good defensive playmaking, can score at an efficient level, but he's not that shooter. He's not a shooter at the free throw line or 3-point shooting. The other guy that I like, that's a bit more in what the Grizzlies like when it comes to the type of statistical profiles that they're looking at is a Kyle Filipowski, because, he meets all those, thresholds. But Kyle Filipowski is more interesting, Nate. Oh, my goodness. Okay.
Shawn's been put in timeout. If you don't know why Shawn's been put in timeout, just replay the past 20 seconds. You'll find it. It's insulting. There's only one person in the world we both simultaneously hate, and Shawn just did it. Listen, we only hate one guy. He's the Grizz community a-hole, and you just call me by his name. Okay, Shawn. You get another chance. But that hurt. That hurt bad.
I apologize. Yeah. But basically when it comes to Kyle Filipowski, he meets the statistical thresholds. He doesn't meet those needs that we need next to Jaren, though. He is someone that is good away from the basket, facilitation, some shooting aspects, things like that. If you're going to go the guy that most nails what we're looking at when it comes to our statistical thresholds, Reed Shepard out of Kentucky, their combo guard, who is a very good low usage, but high. He's an efficiency monster. I love using that term, low usage efficiency monster. Reed Shepard definitely stands out. Zachariah Ricochet is that more front court option that's like that. So if we were to get pick 2 and we didn't sit there and get Sar, Ricochet makes some sense. But those are 5 guys that kind of make sense at the top of the draft. But in my scenario where I think that it makes sense, especially if a Rob Dillingham and those 2 centers are on the board when we pick, is to trade back. Get your guy, get maybe your center your young center that you can have locked up for long term. Maybe get that 3-4 wing that you want to go after, as well. But then trading back, especially if Rob Dillingham's on that board, Daniel, maybe you could go for someone like a Dalton Connect from Tennessee. I know that's a homer guy for me, but that guy who could potentially evolve like a Duncan Robinson, which would be an incredible upgrade over Luke Kennard. Great compliment in the front court to what we have with Jaw and Bain, on offense. That type of guy. A Misi can make some sense as, a guy who may not necessarily be a true impact right there, but say you want to double dip. Say that you want to trade back. You get a veteran big by doing that, who you can afford over the next 2 years. Then Misi comes in as long-term complement for Jaren after that. The point that I'm getting at is that when it comes to the draft, I think that this is a draft where Parker Fleming put it best. He said it. He said this in a great aspect. The Grizzlies are different from most other lottery teams because we're looking for the complement to the core that we've already got established instead of right now looking for our core. The strength of this draft, especially when it comes to big men, is finding those complements that could really help out when it comes our core. And so I think that when we look at what makes sense, the big man makes sense. I think that a lot of people may think if you're a lottery team, you need to draft best player available. Well, in this situation, in many situations, the best player available is likely going to contain a big or a big wing. I would choose them over a guard like a Dillingham, for instance. I know that there's a couple of G League at night guys, Matas Buzelis as well as Ron Holland. I'm okay with potentially looking at them, especially Buzelis. I don't necessarily know if you want to go the wing route once again to try to develop a guy that it may take, a few years to develop. You just went through that, and you failed on multiple occurrences when it comes to Laravia, Roddy, Zaire, so on and so forth. But sure, if you got a Matas Buzelis, he can make sense. But those are just some of the guys that I think can make sense. And all that to be said, and I'll be done in just a second. All that to be said, Nate, the point that I'm getting at is that, again, I get trading the pick is definitely alluring. And in the right deal, you certainly do it. But with how much the Grizzlies have invested, especially starting next year, in Bain and Jaw, and how much they're going to have to pay Jaren in 2 years, you want to be able to hit on a draft pick in this draft. You want to find a rookie that could become one of the top 7 players in your rotation that, along with Gigi and Vince, could be paid very little but still have very good value for this rotation to support your big 3. Imagine a Ja, Bain, Jaren core them supported by a highly effective supporting trio of GG as well as Vince as well as this draft pick. So in my opinion, trading back probably makes the most sense. Trade back to get a piece that could help you out more in the present to support your core, and then pick a guy later on in the draft who could really step into being that rotation piece maybe 1 or 2 years down the line.
I was on mute. You kind of mentioned the guys that I was going to ask you about. I was going to ask about Shepard, Dillingham, Connect.
Yeah.
Those are the three guys that I'm intrigued most by. And the reason being, I'm going to bring up this comment from a minute ago from Anthony saying, I don't like the idea of drafting a big. I don't. I think we have, like, you've seen sort of like some teams get spoiled from getting like a Walker Kessler, which unfortunately we could have had, but we don't have to talk about that. Derek Lively. The Kessler was the Grizz pick that got traded.
No. I understand that, but so you're saying that you're saying you would want a Kessler.
Oh yeah, I would love to have like a Kessler. I would love to have. I don't know if he froze out. Like maybe a Derek Lively. Obviously, those would be great pieces. Those are the exceptions, I think, of drafting bigs as far as what I've seen. If you're going to get that kind of contribution early, that's the problem. I want someone who can contribute, play that center position for you right now.
Oh, that's Donovan Clegan and Kyle Filipowski, in my opinion, and it may be that. But the point the point that I'm getting at is that both Kessler as well as Derek Lively, they didn't have as successful of a college career, nor as high of an upside in the eyes of many as Filipowski or Clingan. So I do understand what you're saying. You want those guys who could be kind of in that rookie year conversation immediately. I think that Filipowski and Clingan can certainly be that.
Well, here's my thing though, Shawn.
Okay.
You could get that where it's like, hey, they came in, they all of a sudden they are able to contribute right off the bat, like a Kessler, like a Derek Lively. You could also get, hey, we just drafted James Wiseman, go us. And then all of a sudden, you're in that position. I do not want to be relying on a rookie center going into next year because I think the Grizzlies are in a win now spot. And I think if you're going to pick someone that maybe contributes right away or maybe doesn't but can develop, you go get a guy that can be a scorer off the bench. I would rather you do that and then go get a center somehow in the offseason, a free agency, sign and trade, whatever that is, and get someone that is a proven asset. Now, if you're just trading back and you're able to do that, but you also get a big that you know can just be solid for you, I'm less upset with that. But if the Grizzlies go into next year relying on a rookie center, I'm not going to be happy. I would rather it be a Dillingham, Connect, Shepard, somebody who's proven they can score, and maybe you develop them, but you don't need what they have in your starting lineup contributing in playoff minutes.
So then my counter to that is this, and my counter to Sane's point about BPA, no matter what. You draft a Reed Shepard, you draft a Dillingham, one of those two Kentucky guards. Or you potentially look to draft a Buzelis, a Clingan, or a Kyle Filipowski. Given where our roster construction is, which is what we're talking about, who is more likely to have a sensible avenue to becoming a part of our top 8 in the playoff rotation? The big wing or the center that develops into a reliable rotation piece, maybe even a starter, or Dillingham or Shepard, who are going to be your third best guard at best. And also someone that you may not be able to potentially play long spurts with Ja and Bang. Because I agree with you. You could see Shepard or Dillingham potentially put up more counting stats in the regular season next year than you could a developmental big wing or a center. But in my opinion, that big wing or center has the more clear avenue to filling a need for us in a playoff rotation long term than a smaller guard. So I think it's just a matter of what you value more than likely.
Well, and I can give you that. I think part of what the difference in our opinions is I don't think the Grizz have enough scoring off the bench. I don't think they have. I think you have Vince. You have the idea of what Gigi's going to become, which that idea seems to become more and more of a reality every passing week. But I don't think you have all that much scoring. So I think that you could use that, and that could be something you develop into. All that to say, I don't mind you drafting a big if that's not what you're relying on next year.
Fair enough.
If you're drafting a big because, hey, we think it fills a need and we think we do have that scoring, or you're going to fill that need otherwise, I'm okay with that. As long as you also get me a big that can go contribute this year to winning in the playoffs, because I think this team has entered the window, and it's time to make winning moves. And so, but if you throw a center out there, and let's say it is a Derek Lively type player, and he just happens to be awesome, great. You kind of fell into that because you picked a guy that you thought you wouldn't have to rely on. Now you have someone like what they have now, or they have Lively, but they also have Gafford. And you have guys that you can rely on. And that's my big thing is when it comes to that conversation, like I said, I'm not a draft expert. I'm sort of just pushing your buttons to see if I can get you to go. But at the same time, what I do know is I do not want to rely on a center. If you're drafting a center, if you're drafting a big, that's fine. Get someone that's a proven NBA asset that can play for you and can play for you and fill that need.
That makes a lot of sense. And I agree with you. At the end of the day, regardless of what you pick, we need to go get a veteran center. We need to go get somebody who, even if he's not Steven Adams, he's in that type of role. So I definitely think it makes sense. But it's an exciting thing to talk about. But at the end of the day, I think I am a agent of making moves, but doing it in a way to where you can get something that can help you out in the present, while also keeping the pick to get you something that can help you out in the future.
Yep. And I think the biggest thing is, and I make sure I mention this at the end of every show because it has been such a just disaster of a season. Next year we get John Morant, Desmond Bane, Marcus Smart, Brandon Clark, Jaren Jackson. You get all these guys playing basketball together, and that's just going to make sweet, sweet music for Grizzlies fans. So all of this to say, I think we put heaven and earth and the weight of the world on these draft picks and these roster moves. When truth be told, you're really just a couple small pieces away from being a true contender with the guys that you have coming back. So a lot of fun stuff to look forward to, a lot of stuff to build around. But we are almost an hour and a half into the show, which I did not expect us to go this long. The Grizzlies winning, I figured, hey, we'll go a bit longer than I thought, but I did not think we'd hit an hour and a half. But Shawn, can't thank you enough, man, for coming on. And like we said, you have a lot of expertise that I don't have, and Daniel especially doesn't have. So I appreciate you coming on, man, and giving us your thoughts and giving us a lot of knowledge that's going to be really helpful and some even keel thoughts heading into the offseason.
Hey, listen, anytime I can come on and chop it up with you and Daniel, but with less Daniel or Daniel, or maybe permanently without Daniel, it definitely is worth it. But Nate, pleasure. And yeah, hopefully we'll get to talk here soon, man. Thanks for the time.
Yeah, appreciate being here. Comment section, as always. Appreciate you guys being here. You're what makes the show go, especially in a season like this. Grizz, again, get the win. Daniel is never going to be on the show, which is why the Grizzlies get the win. But, we have one last comment. Wayne wants to share his group name before we get out of here. We're accepting all submissions for that. So, Wayne, you got a second to put it in while I finish up the outro. Grizz get the win because Daniel was not here tonight. Shout out to Daniel deciding to have a men's league game at 9:00, which is far too late to have a men's league basketball game scheduled. I need to be heading home by 8:30 at the latest, personally. But they'll come back. We have another game coming up on Wednesday at Philadelphia. So at Wednesday at Philadelphia, it'll be at 5:30. We will have a show for you. I am moving this week, so whether or not I'll be here most of the week is yet to be seen. I definitely won't be here Friday. Think I'll make it here Wednesday. Real quick, these names: Bluff City Mafia. Not the worst one I've heard. I like the way you're going. And Grizz 901, The Bear Cave. It sounds like a big radio name. I'm not sure Daniel or I have the voice to pull that off, but I actually am going to add that to the list. We've got a bit of a list going. It's going to come in a shorter list. So we got 901, The Bear Cave, Bluff City Mafia. Either way, you guys are family to us. Shout out to the family for always showing up and showing out. We'll see you back on Wednesday. Until then, be nice. Tell your friends.